Good morning, dear audience. The food is not simply the source of energy, protein, amino acids, minerals, and vitamins. The food may contain originally or accidentally toxic or harmful compounds too. To avoid the health problems, we need food safety. Uh, the, we have to go back to the feeding because everything will start with the soil, with the animal, and only after the food of animal and plant origin. Therefore, the feeding has an important role first on the health and production of the animals. Here you can see excellent pictures. Left side you can see a skeleton of a healthy rat, and before a small scrambled dwarf rat with rachitis, vitamin D and calcium deficiency from the feed in this case. And to give some interesting in the companion animal nutrition, you can see here a dilated cardiomyopathy, which may occur in cats in case of taurine deficiency. But we can have an influence not only on the animal organism in form of deficiency syndromes. We may have metabolic troubles, as the ketosis is a very well known in case of high lactating dairy cow and also in the diabetic person, human. Or, as you have seen, the deficiency syndromes are very typical. This is only the peak of the iceberg because the food may enhance and may inhibit the immune system, and the immune competence depend upon the supply of nutrients and biologically active substances. And finally, as I mentioned, the food may contain noxious factors, and in this case, this is a vector to the human and, of course, to the production animals. Here you can see another important aspect, that the feeding of the animal may influence the product quality produced by the production animals, and this is our food, at least the part of the food of animal origin. The feeding may influence the quantity of the animal product, and here you can see that we will see the milk, and the milk quantity of course depend upon the level of nutrition, the quality, also the composition of the milk, the fat, protein, vitamin, flavor, and even antibody component in the milk depend upon the feeding. And unfortunately, noxious compound may occur. For example, natural noxious compound like mycotoxins from the feed may go into the milk. A good example is the aflatoxin B1, which is highly dangerous for the human, causing liver cancer, but may contains chemicals like the residue of some treatment, antibiotic, for example. The egg is the second very important animal product. The quantity, of course, depend upon the feeding. The measure mostly genetically influenced, and it is mostly depend upon the period of the egg-laying curve and the genotype. But another characteristics of the egg are also important for the consumer human. The fragility depend upon the calcium, phosphate, vitamin D content of the feed and the dietary anion balance. Presence of residuum, it is also a problem, a possible problem in case of the egg. They can contain the taste, color, and the smell of the ingested feed. We have to avoid of giving some feedstuff to the laying hen for this reason. And we can enrich the egg by vitamins and other biologically active substances. Everybody have met in the supermarket with the smart egg with a higher omega-3 fatty acids or high vitamin E egg. The decreasing the cholesterol content of the egg is a goal, but not a big success, because the cholesterol is essential in the egg, and the yolk is an egg and should contain cholesterol genetically. But what we can change by the feeding, this is by colorant, by carotenoids, we can improve the color of the yolk, and we can produce in the laying hen antigen called yolk antigen, which will be present in the egg. So this is the second. In case of the meat, both the quantity and the quality depend upon the feeding. In the Europe classification, we have to know the percentage of fat in the total carcass, but of course that the percentage of water and dry matter is also very important. Meat may have some residue or antibiotic content. The color depends upon the iron supply. See the old-fashioned white muscle calf raising. This is not appropriate to the animal protection, and I'm also not for. The smell and the taste may be important concerning the finisher diet. And the biochemical features like the PSA, pale soft exudative, and DFD, firm dry meat. The right corner you can see a PSE meat which can be found in the living animal. Please don't confuse with the PSA syndrome after the slaughtering. This is a stress-related problem. And the storage time may be influenced by the feeding. A rancid feeding will decrease, and the high vitamin E content in the feed and after in the intramuscular fat may prolong the storage time. I can give a good example about the ham of the Mangalitsa and Landra's pig. And here you can see the role of animal feed in the life of humanity. We can state that the animal products are essential in the supply of the humanity, and at the same time the growth of humanity is exponential. That of the food production is only linear. This is a real problem, and you can see that we are more and more, and we are overpopulated. Of course, that this picture before the pandemic when the 1.5 meter social distance was not considered. But go closer, both unequal. I mean that the food production and the population growth, and the two is absolutely separated. The developed countries has a higher growth rate and less food production. So this is a problem on the top. And we may say that in the human food supply, the animal products cannot be replaced by plant in 100%, at least not in a worldwide range. Many people with financial background may select his or her food supply and can live even in a vegan lifestyle. But just now the world population need animal product because animal product contains ideal proteins, some minerals which are not present sufficiently and vitamins sufficiently in the plants, and some vitamin-like substances which are typical for the animal product, like the L-carnitine, which is also very important. And what about the insectivore approach? Okay, this is a good goal for the humanity to increase the amount of insect in the food selection. Similarly to John the Baptist, who wore a rough coat of camel's hair with a leather belt round his waist, and his food was locust and wild honey. But you see that he was not a real vegan because the leather belt is against this lifestyle. According other scientists, it was a carob and not a locust. In my mind, it was a locust. Okay. Arguments against the strict vegetarianism in the worldwide, I like to underline that this is not for individual approach. 70% of the protein and 80% of the calcium and 100% of vitamin B12 consumption derive from animal product. Types of vegetarianism, strict lacto-ovo can be seen during the Zoom lecture before, but you see that maybe the lacto-ovo vegetarianism is not so difficult economically. And one more argument that the value of the animal food is higher. And why? How to evaluate the value of a food for a human? We use a number. This is an index of nutritional quality. Suppose that as it would be the only daily intake, this given food, for example, this milk, this meat, this plant. And in this case, what is the ingested protein, amino acid, minerals, and vitamins compared to the daily need? So this food would just enough for the energy supply. What is the situation with the other most valuable components? Based on the next table, you will understand. Index of nutritional quality of some animal product. You see that, for example, pork meat related to the protein is 4. It means that if you are eating exclusively pork meat to cover your energy requirement, you will get 4 times more protein than necessary. But of course, it will give a good opportunity to make some complementary mixture. but seeing the vitamin A and the liver. The liver contains a lot of vitamin A, and if suppose you are eating simply liver to cover your energy requirement, in this case you may get 100 times more vitamin A than the need. This is not a real-life problem for human, but for a cat fed on exclusively on liver, maybe vitamin A hypervitaminosis, namely toxicosis. Or you can see that dairy products are very good in all respects with the exception of iron. Okay, so this is the index of nutritional quality. And here you can see that the other side of the coin, because this is not obligatory nice, where meat consumption is highest and lowest, and you see that the deep brown red between 100 and 120 kilo per person per year. So this means that 300 gram meat every day practically, included even the babies. And unfortunately we have 0 to 10 up to 40 kilo per year, very low milk consumption. So this is unequal. The EU meat consumption is similar to that, a little bit lower. You can see here, for example, in 2020, and the composition of the spectra, that the highest amount is pig meat, and followed by the poultry and beef and sheep. The fish is not on these figures. And the meat consumption of the Hungarian data, this is only for interested to the tendencies. And this was the other side of the coin, because at the same time of the high index of nutritional quality, the animal food may hold hazards, like the well-known metabolic syndrome with the atherosclerosis, tumor development, osteoporosis, immune competence decreased, shorter lifetime, and obesity. Even if was related to the healthy food without any harmful noxious compound, but at the same time may occur that hormones, pesticides, antibiotics, dioxin is present in the meat, or the bovine spongiform encephalopathy prion in the other tissues, not only in the meat. So this is what the feed law regulation in the EU strict prohibit the feeding of meat and bone meal or fish meal for meat production animals, and no hormone and antibiotics in the raising up the animals. Here we have to see also the danger of high meat intake on the babies. The maternal consumption. Too much beef meat during the pregnancy in the United States damaged the fetal testis, and the sperm production of the adult sons 20 years later was deteriorated by 25%. The explanation is that in North America, the use of hormones in fattening of the beef is not prohibited, and they may contain, if the slaughtering is before the expiration time. Okay, and what to do? Have to wait. The lab-grown meat will be worldwide, maybe in 20 years, but not now. And what about the third aspect of the food, that the eating is also a social event, source of joy because it is an endorphin release. And at the right you can see Ganadesa, Indian goddess, who is obese because it's happy and obese, eaten a lot. Or in the Bible, you can see that Solomon, the rich king in Israel, had a fantastic provision. For one day in the castle was 30 core of native flour and 60 core of meal, fine flour and meal. 10 fat oxen and 20 oxen from the pastures, and 100 of sheep, as well as stags, gazelles, roebucks, and fattened fowl. So this is too much. So maybe this king and all the administrators used to be fat. Another aspect that the feeding and food and feed may influence the natural resistance, and not only in the classical approach. And the new approach was detected by the benign Coxsackie virus B3, which transformed into virulent if the host organism was deficient in vitamin E and selenium. It means antioxidant. And in this case, a Keshan cardiomyopathy may develop. So we can see the old type of approaches: nutrients, infection, interaction. Diet absolutely has an influence on the organism immune state, but question mark, what's happened with the pathogenic agent. But now we know, according Melinda Beck and co-workers, this is a new conception that the diet will determine the immune state of the organism, the host organism, but also the virulence of the pathogenic agent. And summarized, you can see here that a new model of host-virus nutrition interaction, how the inadequate nutrition will disturb the immune function, and the same inadequate nutrition give opportunity to the virus to increase the virulence, and in this case, the manifestation of problems is clinical problem is possible. And we can move that how we can prevent problems related to the food. As a beginning, I show you Art's pantry in the background with the arm distributing Mary, because at that time in the Middle Age, they tried to make a contrast of the meat. Here is the head of a beef and fish and sausages, etc., cauldron, and distributing arms, which is the goal. But today it is not possible to have a pantry like that, because we know the motto that the diseases partly derives from the feeding, partly from the inhaled air, formulated first more than 2000 years by Hippocrates. So for that we have to know that the food safety have to be controlled from the field to the table, from the production of plant and feedstuff, just through the animal body to the human food of animal production. And it should be done by hazard analysis critical control point approach. Important organs of the food safety are in Europe, the European Food Safety Authority, in the United States, the Feed and Drug Administration together, and the AAFCO, Association of American Feed Control Officials. The appropriate ministry is the USDA, and worldwide we have the Food and Agriculture Organization with a headquarters in Rome and the World Health Organization. Which are the most important harmful and in this way non-desirable compounds? These are the mycotoxins, the biogenic amines, and dioxins, peroxides, and organic acids developed by the rancidity, heavy metals, pesticides, and toxic weed seeds. And this cannot be totally prohibited. In traces may be present. It is told that non-desirable, there is a highest threshold limit. Above that, it cannot be used as a food or a feed. Everything can be known through the labeling. Labeling may be short and enlarged, open and closed formula, and the question is that what to guarantee. But because I've mentioned that with the development of the analytics, the Delaney clause rule or principle cannot be followed, the zero level of the harmful compound, because the analytic can show you even in traces. We have to know every time the withdrawal time. If you feed an animal or treat an animal with a, for example, with antibiotics, you have to know the withdrawal time. What means that the metabolization of total elimination of this antibiotics before the slaughtering. And the GMO content of the feed food is different according to the countries. So this is a summarizing picture of the food safety of the previous some slides. You know that we have to concentrate beside explained the BSA prions too. During the authorization, the administration used limits. The average daily intake is calculated according to an average dry matter intake of a human, 400 or 800 gram. The E numbers, the colorants and the other may be used not only for the human. What is authorized for human can be used for animals. In the EU, the non-chemical substances of the feed and food additives are called Qualified Presumption of Safety, QPS. And the same in the USA is called Generally Recognized as Safe, for example, the plant extract. And what are the authorities for that? In Europe, we have the European Food Safety Authority with a website. They have the main task of the tracing from the crop through the living animal up to the food. They have to make the hazard analysis and alarm signal. Their headquarters is in Brussels. Here you have the question that should you be a vegetarian? And what are the actual tasks of after that of the EFSA and other administrations? The GMO question, the rancidity, the mycotoxins, In the first line, the aflatoxin B1, because this is a direct cancerogenic in human, causing liver cancer. And unfortunately, it is not only in the feedstuffs, but also in the tea and in the chili sometimes. The biogenic amines, the dioxins, the burning byproduct, can be measured in WHO TEF, toxic equivalent factor, because dioxins are more than 100, so we need an equivalent factor expressed in PCDDF. Some bacteria may be present in the feed and food. We have to mention the salmonellosis, listeriosis, and campylobacteriosis as the highest problems. From the heavy metals, the lead, mercury, and the cadmium are the most dangerous. Residues of pesticides, medicines, and the industrial pollutant and originated endocrine disruptors are very important. And what is this QPS or GRAS, which can be considered? And beside the food, the human may get these compounds through the drinking water, so not only through the food. And here you can see a shocking picture from the Scientific American. Don't drink the water. And why? Because sometimes it's developed a vicious cycle, a cycle from the industrial product, waste, firefighting, consumer product, Teflon, etc., and the mentioned environmental pollution, from the environment to the feed, from the feed to the food, and human exposure. So, and human waste is, and this is a circle. What are the most important? The most important industrial pollutants, the first some may be a little bit in the past, and the other from the present. Carbon tetrachloride, trichloroethylene, and benzene may cause spontaneous abortion, not only in the human but also in the pig and other animals. The polychlorinated and polybrominated biphenyls, the PCBs and PBBs, have estrogen-like group, dioxin-like group, and phenobarbital-like group. The later on is possible to enhance the activity of MEOS system in the liver. Today's problem is the polyfluorated carbonates, which are used in consumer goods, and they have similar effect like the PCBs. The dioxin is a byproduct of burning some materials, and they have more than 100 different substances with 3 groups: a cancerogenic group, estrogen-like group in effect, and teratogenic group. And from the heavy metals, the most dangerous are the mercury, the lead, and the cadmium. The biological half-life of the cadmium in the human body, namely in the kidney and in the suprarenal gland, may be more than 17 years. And here you can see a summarizing picture about the possible harmful effects of the mentioned substances. I'd like to draw your attention that the abortion may be in females and testicular cancer in males. and practically all the so-called civilization diseases are also related to this environmental pollutant. Here you see the picture of the summarized problems and possible health damages caused by the industrial pollutants. You can see it in detail, but we have to see once more that the maternal consumption and the babies related to the previously mentioned organic mercury in the sea from taking a healthy fish meal. The fish meat may contain a lot of omega-3 fatty acids, which will improve the brain development of the newborn. We will receive so-called smart newborn. Yes, but what happened if the maternal seafood consumption is more than 3 times a week? It may have a heavy organic mercury loading. So the balance is very, very fine and delicate. As we've mentioned, the water may contain fungi, bacteria, and also viruses. I don't go into the task of the food hygiene of the Salmonella and Campylobacter etc., but I have to mention the Legionella type of model because this is relatively new, at least in Middle Europe, because this is related to the global warming. The air handling and watering systems of swine premises, for example, but other premises like the dairy farm or the human water centers, accumulation of fungi, algae, protozoa, and bacteria may occur. The Legionella-like amoebic pathogens, LLAP, are natural inhabitants of water. They are amoeba parasites. It means that they live in the parasite, in the amoeba, and these pathogens, because they are harboring in amoeba, are more resistant to various environmental stresses, such as the disinfection of the of the future drinking water. Okay, I show you some important harmful algal bloom species just here in the nature, but you can imagine the same in the pipes and tube and water reservoirs. The cyanobacteria and microcystis toxin produced by the cyanobacteria may be the leading problem, but also the chlorophytes, the other cyanobacterium and the dinoflagellata, only to mention some of the harmful algal species. And what are these endocrine disruptors? They will disrupt the endocrine system. They will act like a pseudo-hormone. And in this case, you see that, for example, the vinclozolin, which is a fungicide, has an anti-androgenic effect, or the methoxychlor pesticide has an estrogenic-like effect. Or everybody who use a PET tube has a meeting with the bisphenol A, BFA, which is a component of this plastic. This is also an endocrine disruptor. This is a good news that eating of methyl donors may counterbalance the harmful effect of the bisphenol A. For example, if you are eating zinc salts or betaine, you can counterbalance. These endocrine disruptors do not cause mutation in the DNA, only epigenetic changes like changes of the methylation of the DNA. But they have an extreme danger. If they will act during the formation of the germ cells, sperms and eggs, it may have a transgenerational effect. If the effect of the endocrine disruptors is during the so-called window part of the development of the fetus, it means that during the production of the germ cells, it is possible genetic change which can be transgenerational for many generations. Here you can see an example to the transmission through the male line, and the two very typical endocrine disruptors are the diethylstilbenzol, benstrol, pseudoestrogen, and vinclozolin. And here you can see the histological picture, treatment of rat mother by vinclozolin, and the histology of offspring's testis, inherited through 4 generations. The arrows shows us the damage in the tissue of the testis. The 4th generation will cause damage in the testis. The non-desirable, prohibited, and authorized compound can be found in the classification of the feed and food. From the mycotoxins, the most important is the aflatoxin B1, the biogenic amylator and dioxin. We give a threshold limit. We have prohibited material like arsenic cannot be present. E numbers and generally recognized as safe is another topic. And this is a cartoon that these people, after having eaten GMO fed product, I think gene technique is completely harmless, but he has longer ears, etc., etc. Okay, so we have to overview shortly the deterioration of the feed and food, which may have a oxidation and the development of the rancidity, and maybe a desamination, and in this case biogenic amines will be produced. This picture shows you the evolution of the rancidity. First peroxide and second organic acid are produced with byproduct like aldehydes and polymers, which will decrease the taste quality. But the highest problem is that a very low amount of peroxides may cause a damage in the fast-growing, fast-multiplicating cells, like the cells of the immune system. This picture is from the Malpighi body. Left you have the peroxidized, shrunken lymphocytes accumulation, and the normal big healthy Malpighi body in the spleen at your right. And in the testis you can see very healthy sperm canaliculi with ready sperms in the lumen, and in the left side you have empty space and no sperms at all. And if you have this sperm has a lot of degeneration, a collection on this slide can be found. So please avoid eating rancid butter or rancid meat or other sausages. And what about the other form of the deterioration? This is the desamination of the proteins, amino acid. Biogenic acid has a physiological role in the level of the cell function, but we are speaking about the outside formation in feeds and food. And the occurrence, the most typical occurrence in human feed is the tyramine in the cheese, the histamine in the red wine, and putrescin, spermine, and others in the fish and in the putrescence fruits. Or the nitrose amines are produced in the smoke product. So this is what we have to keep in a low level, or people who has a higher sensibility to that have to control the intake. From the undesirable substances, I wanted to show you the structure of aflatoxin B1, which is the most dangerous. And finally, you can see the protein of animal production related problem, the bovine spongiform encephalopathy, which will start with sometimes with the first sign. She is the cow very ticklish, and the BSE prions may cause spongiform encephalopathy. This is carried not by the meat, but mostly by the nervous system. And on this link, of YouTube link, you can see the clinical signs. The next and last topic are the harmless additives. What are the E numbers? The E numbers are tested once in alone and in one experimental animal for 3 months. And according that they are harmless. They are food colorant, preservatives, antioxidant, emulsifiers, acidity regulators, etc. between 1 and more than 1,000. Aspartame on the picture you can see. And where can we find them? You can see here that, for example, in this brilliant blue containing liquid, citric acid, sodium citrate, monopotassium citrate, and sucralose can be found. Many times they don't add the A number, only the name on the labeling. In the chocolate, ammonium phosphate, polyglycerol, polyretinolate, etc. And even you can see that in the muesli you can have a lot. And are they really harmless? You will see that in combination, maybe not. What happened when they have given two at the same time? For example, brilliant blue plus L-glutaminic acid, or quinoline plus yellow, quinoline yellow plus aspartame. They applied to mouse neuroblastoma cells, and it's turned out that they have a synergetic, additive, negative, inhibitory effect on cell differentiation. I don't try to make the extrapolation, but neuroblastoma cell culture and brain are very close to each other. And the last that simple aspartame, but this is with instead of sugar, but in a higher amount than which is used normally, but it caused the worst maze test using rats. It means that the cognitive functions were deteriorated. The final message is that the doctor cures the man, the vet cures the humanity. So be proud of that, that you may assure the food safety of